So most of you, I see we've got, a few people hopping on. Hopefully we'll have some more hop on, but most of you have probably met Matt already. Matt's been a member of our team for a really long time. Prior to joining us, Matt worked with development of land and knows a lot about how all that works and can help, show you the steps guiding your clients from when they actually purchase land all the way through to building their dream house. So today, what he's going to do is share some of that knowledge with you guys and answer some questions for you and hopefully be able to help you speak in an educated manner when you've got these clients that call in asking about land transactions. So I am going to hand it over to Matt.
All right. And Jennifer, do you have my screen already being shared? Or do I need to do that already?
You should be able to share your screen.
Let me share the screen here. Let me double check here. Let's go screen 2 here, guys. Okay, let me know when everybody can see the screen.
It's coming up. There it goes. We got
it. Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, kind of taking a look. Let's see who we got here. I got some familiar faces. Oh boy, Richie Rich is here. Love Richie Rich. All right, hey guys. So listen, land is kind of one of those kind of weird things. We have to kind of deal with it every once in a while. But it seems to be kind of, I think more people have more questions about it or unsure about it or aren't confident about it. So what I'm going to do here, guys, this should be interactive. So feel free to kind of, speak up, ask a question at any point in time. That's totally fine. Not going to, screw up my rhythm or anything like that. And we kind of go from really, I'm going to give you the basics here as far as what you really need to understand underneath, kind of behind the scenes, if you will, about what land and what makes it different from buying a regular, say resale home, for instance, some of the challenges we have, and then where we can go to find some of the answers that, one, answers to questions our clients are most likely going to have, okay, whether they know it or not yet. And your clients are going to really range from, those that are quite experienced, have done something like this before, have either built the house for themselves or are someone even more advanced where they're looking for something more as an investment and they're going to, something like that, right? Typically, what I consider the professionals, we have our guys already, right? We have our land guys that find land for us and help us do our due diligence and stuff like that. So most of the time, we're going to find those that are a little bit more, let's say, on the novice side of things, okay, if that makes sense, all right? So we're going to kind of go through this. We'll talk about the different types of land there are, some of the things to the initial answers we should have at the ready for our clients. Okay, things like utilities, where they're located, stuff like that. Have a general idea of the time frame it takes to get things entitled and approved or permitted, right? In various cities, stuff like that. I'm not going to get super specific on those because honestly, each city is they're different. They generally follow the same path, if you will, but they all are unique in some way or another, and sometimes multiple ways, and in how they handle things. Okay, so for some reason, we just like to be unique on that. So, all right, here we go, guys. Let me see if I can get this to advance. There we go. Okay, so where do we start? Guys, again, overview here, difference between raw land, papered land, finished lots, okay? How long does it take before, from land acquisition to literally we're getting our certificate of occupancy and we can sleep in our house for the very first time, right? So we're gonna talk residential today, not commercial at all. And then during our transaction, how much time do we need for our due diligence and feasibility studies, okay? And really, what are those things that we're asking about? And then where can we help kind of get some of our answers, all right? So with that here, guys, let's kind of kick it off. Any questions at this point or anything that anybody wants to see from me today, or more specifically, but maybe you've got a client today that you're working with. Any quick questions right now? Nope, sounds? All right, very good. Okay, raw land, guys. Raw land is just how it sounds, Nothing's been done to it, okay? We haven't had any improvements. No one's really come in there and, pulled a rake through it, put a shovel to it. There's certainly no, improved roads typically going in and through it. Maybe we've got roads going to it, or maybe it's a dirt road, okay? Or for all intents and purposes, that piece of land could be what we consider landlocked, which means there is actually no feasible access to it or legal access to it, all right? Something like that obviously can be very difficult. If we truly have a landlocked situation, that means we have to go to the surrounding property owners and essentially ask and more than likely pay for an easement to access our property. Because if we were to walk through someone else's land, they can, legally have us, removed, okay, and forcibly removed. I've literally been in a situation before, so it's not here in California, fortunately, out in Colorado, where I had a client who took it upon themselves to walk through someone else's property to get to a landlocked piece of land to look at it, and literally had a gun drawn on them and a shotgun fired in the air. So when it comes to, you start getting out there and you start doing raw land, landowners are extremely protective of their land, all right? Main reason is because of squatters. Squatters can come in there and all of a sudden, over a period of time, they can take over a piece of your land just because they've been there for too long. All right. Here's an example of a piece of raw land. This is from a little while ago, but this is not far from where we're at. This is out in Valley Center. Okay. Just kind of what it looks like. Typically, raw land is going to be your least expensive piece of land you can possibly buy. Why? Because nothing's been done to it. Nothing's been improved upon, right? So every time we make improvements and we go down this road here, we're going to talk about paper lots here soon. Every time we we entitle something, we get some sort of approval, we improve it, we're adding value to that raw piece of land, and the price is going to start going up. So you'll notice here as the prices start going up. Okay, papered lots. So kind of as the name suggests, that means that on paper, we have a subdivision, right, of land. So we took that raw piece of land and we've now essentially carved it up. We've done some meets and bounds. We've got legal descriptions for each one of these lots. They're numbered. We can go out there with a surveyor and literally stake the corners and know exactly where that piece of land is and what we're buying, all right? Typically there, we are not going to have any roads necessarily improved upon. There might be something that's been existing there, but nothing new and improved typically, all right? And most of the time, if we go out there and we take a look at these, it's going to look like a raw piece of land still. We're not going to have the obvious, grading done, property lines established, things like that. It's still going to look like a raw piece of land, but on paper, all right, if you kind of look here, we actually have meets and bounds. We've got measurements that we can go out there. And like I said, we can put our property corners in. We can find exactly where that lot is, okay? Any questions on raw land or paper lots yet? Okay, so now let's move on. So again, from raw land to paper lots, right? There's been an improvement there. So there's probably going to be an uptick in price. So maybe that raw land was worth 45, thousand, for the 5 acres. Now maybe it's worth 45,000 for each one of those lots, potentially, right? So now we go to a finished lot. This again is taking the papered lot to a whole other step. Now we've actually put in things like roads, gutters, sewer, utilities in the road, right? We're stubbing out our utilities into individual lots now, right? And then we've also more than likely have done some preliminary grading on those lots. So we've kind of created a housing pad, okay? Something there where we have what we call spoils already on site. And it allows us, so when we dig a foundation, not talking necessarily basements, but even stem walls, we dig that foundation, okay? We're going to take that dirt, because we're going to have excess dirt. We're going to put it across the lot. The lot, if we've done it correctly in the grading, will balance. The dirt will balance. So we don't have this big, heap of dirt out there in the middle of our lot or in the back end of our lot that we have to somehow get rid of, right? So the developer has come in and once again improved upon the land and added value. So now we've added some significant things, some things we can actually, see and touch, right? So the roads, the curb, the gutter, the sewer, the utilities, all those types of things, right? And we're talking about utilities. Typically, this is kind of typical. It's not everywhere because things are unique, right? But typically we try and run as much as we can underneath the roads so that if we have to come in and repair something, upsize it, whatever it may be, we're going to be interrupting the public right of way, right? So that's the roads. That's basically from, either the back of the sidewalk, if we have sidewalks, right, from either side to either side, or from the back of curb, either side to either side, right, which encompasses the street. So we can dig up that area as a utility company without disturbing the homeowners, right? But from there, so the main lines are in the road, and then all of the utilities will stub out typically 10 feet into the lot. So now it allows the new home builder to just tap into those utility lines, okay? Now, of course, there are going to be some soft costs there with some connection fees to each one of those utility services, but the physical infrastructure is now there ready for you to plug and play, if you will. Okay, so I'm going to back up real quick because I kind of went through generally what the difference is between raw, papered, and finished lots. Now let's go back real quick and let's look at the time frame of each of these, okay? Because this is really important when we're talking about writing a deal and we're talking about our clients, setting the expectation about how much time it takes to actually build, right? To a point where I say you're putting your head on the pillow, it varies depending on what we're dealing with. So raw land, due diligence, because raw land, typically we don't have a lot of information on it, right? Owners sometimes, the original owners have passed this down through generations. They've held on to it for a long time. Sometimes the new generation doesn't really have much information on it at all. A lot of times don't have, any geotech reports, any percolation tests, all these type of things that we need to know about the land before we can build. Most of the time, this stuff has not been done. Sometimes we barely even had a survey, okay? So it may be really old. So due diligence, I always recommend at least 90 days because it takes time dealing with all the different municipalities, all the different players in the game to get these things, to get a surveyor out there, to get a geotech out there, things like that. It takes time. So timing, again, from purchase to putting your head on a pillow is typically about 3 to 4 years. 1 to 2 years to get your entitlements. In other words, you may have zoning changes, but basically to be entitled from the county to actually build a residence on that piece of land, right? 6 to 9 months for your actual building permits. Okay, I'm just talking building permits once we submit to the city, right, or to the county, right? I'm not talking about the design time, the engineering time of those building plans. I'm talking we've submitted, we've got a couple of different revisions coming back, and then we finally have permit ready plans, okay? And then typically 12 to 18 months build out. All right, so moving on now to our papered lots, papered lots, I don't have the timeline on there, but I'll tell you, typically paper lots are going to be similar to raw land. It's kind of in between raw land and papered lots. I'm sorry, finished lots. So typically I'd say about 60 days. All right, it kind of depends on how much information we have from the seller's side and how many kind of blanks we have to fill in still, right? It's already been entitled. So when we go back here and we look at the 1 to 2 years for entitlements, well, it's already been entitled. So we've already been told and approved by the county that we can build there. So now we're really looking more for the building permits and stuff. However, there may not be physical access there. So you, if you're the first builder, you may be responsible for building that road in for yourself. And then on the backside, after other people buy lots and build homes, you're gonna, kind of recuperate some of those costs, right? So there's a lot of variables that kind of go into that. Finished lots, guys, are really the easiest game for someone who truly is set on building their own home, okay? Because we've got the infrastructure there. We're ready to essentially, once we have our permits, we're ready to put a shovel in the ground and start building, okay? So due diligence, 30 days, typically because the seller has most of the engineering, most of the due diligence done for us. Now it's mostly about us trying to make sure that we can build the type of home we want to build on that lot. It's going to fit within the building envelope, for instance, taking into account the setbacks, front yard, rear yard, and side yard setbacks, for instance. Those make up the building envelope, right? As long as we can fit that home in there, great. If this L has an HOA, for instance, and someone's going to be determining the style or the size of home, for instance, we want to know that type of stuff. But generally speaking, all the information is available to us, right? So that's why the due diligence period is only about 30 days. Timing is more like 18 to 24 months. Again, more like the 3 to 6 months for building permits. I still like to keep that at 6 to 9. And then you're looking at a 12 to 18 month build out again. Yeah. Any questions on that, guys?
I have
Okay,
a quick
here's-
question for you, Matt.
Go ahead. You
So
got
I
it,
just want to
Ashley.
make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. It can take months to get all of the correct permitting and, making sure that the land is even buildable for the house that you want. And then it could take a couple of years from like foundation being poured to head on the pillow. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so if you let's go back here to this one here. So essentially, you're going to have some design time in there, right? Where you're working with the architect, and the architect's going to have your engineers typically working under them, right? It's not usually advisable to hire an architect and hire your structural engineer and hire your civil and all that. The architect usually handles all that for you, but there's design time because you're going to go in. Even if you buy a house plan essentially off the shelf, right? Typically, almost always, there are some modifications that have to be made either to fit you personally or to fit the site, right? Or both. So there's going to be some tweaking going on there, even in an off-the-shelf plan. If we're designing from scratch, that design time can take quite a bit depending on the back and forth, how efficient that is, how many changes you have, so on and so forth, right? Revisions. So it's kind of an X factor. But take the design time out of it, getting to the city and submitting your plans to a point to where you now have approved plans and permit. Typically, I say that's 6 to 9 months. Does that answer your question, Ashley? And then the
Yeah.
build out after that is going to be depending on the size of the house, the complexity of the house, so on and so forth. I've seen them built as quick in a production builder. We'll build a house in 4.5, 5 months, but you're not a production builder, right? And you're not going to be dealing with the production builders. So typically you've got a general contractor, he has all his subcontractors and they're going to be building that. And he's probably got several projects. The fastest I've typically seen there on a smaller scale house, more straightforward, is about 9 months.
Gotcha.
I tell people safely 12 to 18 months.
So it's
And
going
most
to
general
be,
contractors will agree with me on that.
yeah, it's going to be a long time from the time you purchase your land to actually moving in. Long time. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Yep.
I have a quick question, Matt.
Go ahead, Paul.
What if someone wants to put like a mobile home on a piece of land that is, somewhat finished?
Right. So number one,
That
you have
is
to
real
make
quick. Can I just
sure-
say
Yeah,
that
go
is
ahead.
the number one asked question in all of San Diego.
Yeah.
So please, Matt, make sure you address this so everybody understands. If you
Yeah.
have to like, get your face, please
Oh,
save us
I
all.
love you, Rich.
I love you, man.
I love you, Rich.
I've been waiting for this question.
I know, man. I know. And
Good.
and you guys are absolutely right. This is probably the number one, I guess, intention, right? That our clients we hear all the time, right? So here's a couple things on that. Number one, unless we're way out there in unincorporated and stuff like that, we have to make sure that we can actually that a mobile home can be put on that piece of land first and foremost. Okay, so we need to speak with the jurisdiction. Typically, it's going to be a county. All right, I don't get too many people saying, "Oh, I want to put a mobile home in that empty lot that I just found in Cardiff." All right, that's not going to happen. Okay, one, I can't do it, and two, I've never heard that. Typically, we hear this when they're a little bit kind of on the edges of our build out areas, right? And they want to put something on there. But I've heard about it like in Calavera Hills, for instance, want to put a mobile home out there. Okay. It's not a hard and fast yes or hard and fast no. You need to dive into that one and dig into it, see if it's even possible in that particular area. Okay. Now, putting a mobile home on there, we're talking about like a mobile home or a manufactured home. Those are two very different things, right? Mobile home, we're coming in on wheels, right? Manufactured home, we're still putting that on a foundation. So we still have grading. We still have utilities to run in, to connect. We still have a foundation we have to put down for that manufactured home, okay? So manufactured home is essentially an off-site built home that's delivered to site, all right? So it's still a home. It still needs a foundation. So make sure that your client understands that first and foremost as well. Now, a mobile home, when I hear mobile home, I'm here, it's coming in on a trailer on wheels, right? And maybe we do permanently affix it to the ground, so on and so forth, but that's going to be a county decision in that area. Now, we don't necessarily need a foundation like we do for a manufactured home, but you're probably going to want to have a nice level ground. The ground's got to be able to support that thing over time. If we're going to actually affix it to the ground, now we need actual it's foundations, but they're like little piers, right? It's not super complex, but is it possible? Yes. But I warn you or caution you before you answer that question, or how to answer that question is, we need to speak to the county, to the jurisdiction, the building department, to make sure that that piece of land, one, can accept a mobile home. Does that answer your question, guys? I know it's not clear cut and say, yes, you can, no, you can't. It really varies. But your best resource is the building department within that lot that lot falls within. Okay, and they're easy to get a hold of.
And so I have a question on
No,
that.
go ahead, Wendy.
So what you're saying is that no utilities are required, but a graded area that is going to support the weight of a mobile home is like the bare minimum requirement, or do other utilities need to be available?
So I didn't speak about utilities. Okay, so utilities are required. Now, technically, we don't have to have utilities. I don't have to plug into sewer, water, gas, electric, right? I can supply all those things for myself. I can do solar and a generator, right? Backup. I can do a septic or leach field, right? I can for water, right? I can if I can pump a well, I can drill a well, I can get water, right? I have water rights. Water rights is another issue. So I can do all those things. Gas, I can have propane tank on site, right? I don't have to plug into the utilities. I can be completely off the grid. That just means that it's more maintenance and upkeep for yourself as a homeowner, right?
Mhm.
Okay, but if we have utilities though, and we plan to connect those utilities, whether it's a site-built home, a manufactured home, or a mobile home, right? If we plan to plug into those utilities, there will be connection fees.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
And that would be because like what comes to my mind, when you go to like, I don't know, somewhere in City Heights or Encanto, you do have, sometimes you see those like small lots that are surrounded by residential homes. So that's usually like more likely where there already will be like electrical connection, right? That won't be an issue, or like the water won't be an issue to get connected.
Yeah, the closer we are to existing homes, residential areas, right? The more likelihood that we're going to have utilities close by. Now, where those utilities are located, that needs to be determined, okay? Because sometimes, so for instance, here's a good example. Up in Santee, right? Up in the hills there, heading to the north, there's a bunch of lots that have been up there forever, okay? I've fielded so many calls on these and taken so many clients up there that I now just speak on the phone about it. I can send them videos about it, right? I don't need to go up there anymore. But the utilities, for instance, are 500 feet away. And so you talk 500 feet, well, that's not that far, really. Well, it is. Bringing utilities up and into the land where you've got essentially boulders the size of Volkswagens underground, that require dynamite and stuff like that, because the bulldozers aren't big enough, right, to move these things, it becomes extremely prohibitive to do that. To grade a housing pad up there for yourself, again, you're running into these buried Volkswagens, right? So it's not always super easy to do. So, but the closer you are, Paula, to the residential area, the more likelihood you're going to have easily accessible utilities. Okay, but that's one thing that you will absolutely have to identify with your client about where those are. One, do they exist? Yes or no? They do? Okay, great. Where are they? Because sometimes we've got, for instance, electricity on power poles, overhead poles, and we may be able to see them. They look like, oh, those are pretty close. Well, the electric company may require us to put in a new pole and string those over and bring them down into a junction box and put them underground, right? There's requirements. The utility companies will have requirements. So that's part of the due diligence that we have to do. And why I say, depending on the information we get from the seller, really kind of dictates how long we're going to have our feasibility period, right? Or our escrow. Okay. Does that answer your question, Paula?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Yeah. That's a great start. Thank you.
Okay.
So
good to
like
go.
the short answer is yes, it's possible in some areas, but there will be due diligence. Like we just have to prepare our clients for, like, it's not guaranteed. We'll have to, obviously do our due diligence, and it's based on what the county determines, right? If a mobile or manufactured home can be put outside of like a designated park and
Correct.
things like that. So it's like, it's not a no, but it's also not a guaranteed yes.
Yeah, here's the
Right.
thing, and if I can, so here's the thing. Everybody that comes into San Diego always wants to buy land, and they always want to put a manufactured home on it, because then they figure at some point they're going to wind up building on it, which in most cases they don't. Back in the day, Santee was one of those where they allowed that. And what happened was it turned into these little compounds, and it started, I'm not trying to be mean on this, but it started collecting a lot of debris. And when I say debris, I say that nicely, as opposed to just a junkyard. And so the city then has, not the city, well, all of San Diego has gotten to where it's like, okay, look, we've got to have regulations on this, because it can get out of hand. You've got homes that are nice, and then you've got a manufactured home, and you've got someone that just doesn't care, So you can't just buy a piece of land and then just put something on there like that. You like what Matt's saying is, you've got to at least do the due diligence, go find out and see if you're able to put that on there. Usually about 98 to 99% of the time in the city, if it's outside of a park, manufactured park, you're not going to be able to do it. Unless, of course, now you're going out further, like Hamul, Alpine, somewhere out in those areas, then, there's probably some areas that you can find, Ramona, something like that, But in the city of San Diego, there are regulations, and that's why it's controlled. It's because it would just get so out of hand. And am I wrong on that, or?
No, you're right. You're right, Rich. So
That's all it is. I mean, just to put it blunt, I'm just
Yep.
saying, because we've got to preserve what little land we have, and we've got to make sure that it's utilized correctly and it's done right. Otherwise, I mean, we're going to have everybody from Minnesota to Missouri to Tennessee, and they're all coming here to, boy, I'm gonna bring my trailer here. And
Hey
I'm
guys,
just
on
telling you.
on the screen, I've got this is a good example here. So kind of, Paula, to your point, and everybody else here, if you take a look at this photo here, what you have, I don't know if my cursor is working or not, but essentially you have here's some things to look at, right? We have power lines running right alongside a road, okay, and on the right hand side there we have access with the road, okay. We have established homes very nearby, right? This is an area where more than likely we're going to have all of our utilities that we need right there, ready to plug and play. Okay. Worst case scenario on this, we're going to have, let's say, sewer and water that are in the road, but they're not stubbed out into the property. Then we just have to reach out into the center of the road essentially and grab and plug in, and then bring that stub into our property. Okay. This is a good example of what I consider a finished lot, right? It hasn't necessarily been recently graded, but you can see some flat areas where it's likely that a house is going to be built, right? It kind of is, it becomes pretty obvious when you have a finished lot where the house goes and where the utilities are likely going to be located, right? So there's a lot less mystery, which is why, again, we don't need as long of a due diligence period. Okay, so let's talk due diligence, guys. All right, we've been talking a little bit about it. So first question I always ask is, why are they selling? Okay, because that question right there is probably going to get you them opening their mouth and giving you some lead in and some more questions to ask going down the road here of due diligence. All right, that's the number one question. Okay, then we want to get right into our utilities, the services, and the fees. Okay, so again, we talked about some of these briefly. Gas, if we don't have a gas in the road, for instance, we may need propane. So again, most of the time we're kind of talking, or we're kind of getting towards the outskirts of our buildup areas. But I mean, I've got a client we're looking at a lot in Cardiff. Okay, so it's everywhere. It doesn't matter. So gas may require propane. Electric. Do we have it in the road? Do we have it overhead? Do we need solar and a generator, for instance, if we're going to stay off the grid? Water, metered or a well, okay? And then sewer, we have our municipal, or we've got our septic system, septic type of system, right? So if we're doing something like sewer, sewer is a big thing. Guys, if we don't have sewer to tap into, right, to flush our toilets and have our showers and our sinks go down to, right, then we have to do what we call a percolation test. In other words, they're going to come out and they're going to test the soil to make sure the soil is going to be receptive of our waste field, right? Because of a few things. One, we don't want it bubbling up to the surface, and two, we don't want it going down into our drinking water, okay? So they have to check this out and make sure that we have, one, enough land to do this, two, that the soil and everything is going to be receptive to having a septic type system, okay? A leach field, for instance. A septic tank is different. Okay, now that's all self-contained and everything like that, and we put chemicals and probiotics and all kind of stuff in order to break everything down. It has to be pumped and cleaned every once in a while, but septic's a little bit different. A leach field, though, is where we need that percolation test to make sure that the soil is going to take care of that. Okay, so what supporting documents and information does the seller have for us? And again, this is going to determine how long of a due diligence period we really need, or escrow period, right? So obviously some very key things here. You can kind of look down the line here, but obviously title, a plat map. A plat map looks like that, okay? It shows our meets and bounds, our roads. It shows all the kind of good information on that. Zoning and land use verification, the city master plan. This is where we're talking with the city's building department, okay, and the planning department. We want to make sure that we want to check the zoning. If we don't understand what the zoning means, we can go in and we can research and find that out, okay? So usually in our zoning means residential. This is an R1 or an R2 or an R3, 5, whatever it may be, right? What that typically will mean is it's residential. We can build a house on it, and the number, and it varies from city to city, but the number usually tells us the minimum lot size that we can subdivide something into, right? So an R1 may mean simply that, hey, we can have one house on this, a single dwelling unit, right? Or it may mean that we can have one house and the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet or 1 acre. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? So we always have, even though we may know what the zoning means in Escondido, it doesn't mean the zoning is the same down in Chula Vista. Okay, so make sure you double check zoning. Special taxes, Mello-Roos, improvement bonds. On Slack this morning, Amanda was asking about Mello-Roos and how do we find out, one, how much they are, and two, how much time do we have left on them, right? So Mello-Roos is a capital improvement bond that's voted on by the taxpayers for the benefit of the municipalities, the city, right? So what happens when we come in and we start building a bunch of houses, let's take Forest Ranch, for instance, right? Forest Ranch still has Mello-Roos. We all know where Forest Ranch is. right? Well, they came in, they had this big master plan community. They plopped down 1,000 houses and parks and roads and all this kind of stuff. Well, guess what else they need? They need schools. They need fire departments. They need police departments. They need public sewer, public water, public gas, all those type of things. They need all that stuff, right? Well, guess what? The city doesn't have a big, purse of money sitting on the side over here waiting for Forest Ranch to say, hey, we're ready to start building, right? So that's what the bond, it's essentially a loan, a taxpayer loan to the city to say, hey, here you go. Here's the funds required from our tax dollars to put in all the support infrastructure to support our new community coming in now. Okay. So they're typically 20 to 25 years. They're usually taken out either twice a year or annually. So you can check on those. The site for that is sdarcc.gov. It's San Diego Assessor Recording. I forget what the acronym means, but anyway, you can find it online, or the tax bill. The tax bill typically will tell you how much it is, and it'll give you a phone number to call directly to find out how much time is left on it. Okay, so Melrose improvement bonds. Okay, here's another thing, guys. If you're buying a piece of land, the seller sometimes, and it's kind of sneaky, right? The seller sometimes will pass on the improvement bond. So the city may come to them and say, hey, yeah, that's a great home plan. That's great. Here you go. Here's your permit. You're ready to pull this. Oh, by the way, you need to widen our street. Or by the way, you need to add in a sidewalk in front of you and your two neighbors on either side of you, right? The city can do that as a condition to certificate of occupancy. So by the time they're done building, that sidewalk's got to be in. So that improvement requirement can be tacked onto that piece of property. Okay, so make sure you ask the question if there are any improvement bonds or any improvement requirements from the city on that lot. Surveys. Kind of briefly talked about this a little bit. Boundary, topo, and alta. Okay, a boundary sounds just like what it means, right? We put in property corners, meets and bounds. We know exactly the boundary of our lot. Topo, topography. The graders will use that, right? They need to understand the land and where, if we're going to be shaving down this hill here to fill in this one here, they need to know the dirt balance, stuff like that, right? But a lot of times the graders will pay for that themselves. If you use them, they will cover that themselves. And then Alta is essentially a plat map on steroids. It shows every easement, every possible encumbrance or anything like that. And typically at a residential level, it's not required. But sometimes you'll see it. If you ever see one, it's a good piece of document there. Environmental reports, depending on what we're building, may be required by the city, right? To make sure we don't have, some endangered species or vegetation, a protected vegetation out there. Okay, sagebrush, for instance, there's a particular type of sagebrush out there that literally you can't disturb, right? There's also little critters out there that you can't disturb as well. Natural hazard zones, this is pretty obvious there: flood, fire, earthquake, seismic, stuff like that. We need to understand if we're in any of those areas there, because that's going to impact the insurance side of things. The geotechnical report, this is where they come out and they're going to drill into the soil. They're going to take compaction tests of that soil, and this is for the structural engineer who's going to design your foundation that your house is going to sit on, to make sure that the thing's not shifting and cracking slabs and things like that. They need to do that. Preliminary grading analysis is kind of going back with that topo survey, right? So you get a grader, they're going to come out and do an initial analysis on that and let you know if they need to either import or export dirt, or if they can use everything on site and spread it around, right? That's the best thing. Let's see here, HOA and POA. So HOA, homeowners association, POA, property owners association. You see POAs typically in some of these situations because all the homeowners, for instance, will share responsibility and maintenance and cost of, let's say, a common road that everybody uses to get in and out of their houses, right? But that may be the only thing that they share. That's it. So there may be a small POA there. They don't have any governance over the style of the house, or the size of the house, or anything like that, or what you do on your land. They're just there to divvy up money, collect money, divvy up money to pay for road maintenance. Deed restrictions, architectural guidelines, manufactured homes. These are all things we've heard about when it comes to HOAs, okay? The percolation test, we've talked about that one. The neighbor influence. This is a key piece that most agents will overlook, okay? If we have neighbors, guys, I highly, highly recommend, if we're getting serious about buying a piece of land, especially if we're in a neighborhood or any area, to have your clients or you and your clients go have a quick conversation with the neighbors and ask open-ended questions and shut your mouth and open your ears, because they'll tell you everything. They'll tell you everything that's going on in that neighborhood. And they'll even tell you if you want to be their neighbor, right? Because you're going to understand if they're kind of a pain in the ass or they're going to be cool people, right? But they're going to tell you the lay of the land because they've been there a hell of a lot longer than you guys have been, or your client has been, really, right? And they're going to tell you, give you the lay of the land. Okay, so where can we find some of these answers, guys? Again, sellers and neighbors are your first kind of line of defense, if you will, or line of information. I always start there. And after that, we start getting into, if we're still interested, right, we get into the city and the county websites, the municipal offices, right? So all of our utilities, and then contractors and consultants. So if we're really getting serious, we want a contractor who's built in that area because they know. For instance, someone who's building in Cardiff is not going to know a lick about building in Santee, right? They're not going to know off the top of their head, oh yeah, we're probably have to use dynamite to create a building pad for you in Santee. Whereas in Cardiff, if someone's, you know, a GC out in Santee coming to Cardiff, they may not even be aware of the Coastal Commission, right? And what authority they have over what you build, okay? So you want to have someone who's local. Okay, so let me ask questions there because this stuff kind of gets into the differences between writing an RPA and a VLPA, stuff like that. So questions at this point here, guys. Okay, 1044, we're kind of getting there on long here. Basically, guys, the big differences here is that typically we're going to be using an APN versus an address when we're writing a VLPA. Sometimes the legal description instead of a street address, okay, stuff like that. You may not have a street address, guys. It may be just an APN. Kind of looking through some of this stuff here. Let me know if there's anything in particular you really want me to get on to, but we've talked about some of this stuff. I kind of want to get into some of the financing side of things of this. So that's pretty important about this and understanding the differences between simply getting a mortgage and getting a construction loan, okay? Okay, so I've used US Bank for quite a while, but I know we've got a few others. I think Sri has had some success with some, and I think maybe some others have had success with others. By all means, generally speaking, though, they're all basically the same, but they all have all their own little rules too, okay? So instead of a mortgage, what we're basically getting here is a construction loan, okay? And the amount we have to put down, that type of stuff, that varies depending on the lender. Typically, we're looking at like 20, 25% down, okay? But that construction loan is going to handle essentially all of your costs, from purchasing the land to paying off your general contractor at the very end, right? And then at that point, once we're done with construction, we have our certificate of occupancy. That construction loan, which is typically an ARM, is now going to convert into a conventional, typically 30-year loan. Although they knock a year off it, it's like 29 years, okay? But it'll automatically convert. And at that point in time, you can also refinance because that rate is typically, sometimes it's set at the time you open up that construction loan. Other times it's set at the current market rate at that day and time. It depends on the lender. Let's see here. This is more US Bank kind of specific. Talked about what was in red there. So the builders, the general contractors have to be approved by the lender. It's not difficult, but they're basically, the lenders can be going and looking at making sure that the contractor is licensed, that they're not a crook, right? That they are experienced and have a good portfolio of builds of this type that we're getting ready to build. So they go through, the bank does their due diligence on the general contractor. Okay. But understand that you have to have them approved prior to this. Okay, most lenders are going to require a fixed contract. Okay. Sometimes we do what we call a cost plus. There's other variations, but a fixed contract means that for this particular price, me, the general contractor, I'm going to deliver this house with a certificate of occupancy, meaning we've gone through all the inspections and passed all of those, and the city and the county have given us our CO, right? So now you can legally live in this house, and we're going to do it for this price. If there's any changes, you come in and say, you know what, that closet's too small, I want to turn that into a walk-in, right? Or, you know what, that half bath, I want that now to have a stand-up shower. Changes like that change your price, right? There'll be change orders. So, and that's a conversation that is, that's a wormhole that we can go down, that can talk forever and what happens with people, but maintaining a budget and staying on budget is one of the hardest things ever, because it impacts your timing as well. Let's see here. Okay, pretty self-explanatory there of things that you're going to need. Monthly payments. So basically you're paying, typically most lenders, you're doing an interest-only payment on whatever is out. So if we go out there and we start grading, right? Let's say we bought the land for $250,000. Okay, well, we'll start paying interest-only payments on that $250,000. Then we go and we pay a grading company $100,000 to grain and dig our foundation. Okay, $100,000 gets sent out to them. What happens then is the bank sends out a representative to inspect, to make sure that, okay, this is what I've been invoiced for. Okay, I see we've got everything looks flat and foundation has been graded or dug out. Okay, good to go. We'll pay them. All right. Now you get there, you got the concrete guys that come in and do your foundation. You got the framers that come in and put the sticks up, and you send another invoice for another $200,000. And the bank sends out a representative, says, okay, yep, I see the work's been done. Good to go. Check goes in the mail. It used to be back in the day that we basically just gave the general contractor the bank's checkbook, and he just wrote it out to all the subcontractors. The problem was that the money didn't always stay on site. Sometimes it went to other projects too. And then we had always, at the end, we had a problem with the lender and the general contractor getting all squared up. Okay. Contingencies. There's a little debate out there in contingencies. Some lenders require you to have a contingency, typically some in the neighborhood of 10 to 15%. Others don't necessarily require it. And I'm kind of the opinion, I like to have a contingency in my own, but I keep my money. Okay. So if I have an overrun, then I'll take out of my own personal funds and I'll pay that off. Right. I don't want the bank necessarily putting out a contingency out there and I'm end up paying on that contingency as well. Okay. But contingency, there's always overruns. I don't care who you are. I've never been on a construction project where we haven't had a change order, haven't had a change in the budget, and it went up. So, as well as time. So contingency is very important. So a 10% contingency is what I consider, the basic or the minimum. Okay, guys, kind of went through that banking side and the kind of things of that fairly quickly. Kind of trying to be aware of your time here. So we got 10 minutes. Kind of open it up to whatever you guys have. Any client issues or what do you have? Anybody?
All I have to say, Matt, is thank you. And this is a whole other beast.
It is, guys. And to that point, Taylor, guys, and I've kind of put this out, but we've got a lot of new faces, since I've done this class here in the past. But so Nathan, for instance, has used me in the past. Richie, I've gone out on site with Richie and stuff like that. So if you have clients, guys, especially if you kind of do the litmus test on them and you think they're serious, right? And you think they're not what I consider a land dreamer, right? But we're actually serious. They know what they're talking about. They've got a budget. They have done their own homework on things, right? Pass that litmus test. Then I'm happy to come out on site and help you guys kind of walk the land with them and answer those questions. I'm not going to have every answer, but I'll know where to find answers for you. Okay,
Yeah, for
so
sure. He's awesome.
yeah, I'm happy to come out and help you guys kind of get through that. And then once you've done that with me once or twice, you'll kind of, I think your confidence, if you haven't ever done this at all before, your confidence will come up and you'll be able to kind of handle that on your own. And then know that you always have me in your back pocket. You can always get me on the phone and say, hey, Matt, got a weird one here for you. I got a weird question. Don't know where to find the answer to it. I'll help. I'm more than happy to help you guys out.
Hey, when you guys have clients asking for APN numbers, they pretty much are understanding what's going on with land. Because how many people know what an APN number is that's tied to land? I'll guarantee, don't show your hands, but there's a number of people on this call right now I know that don't. So that's the cool thing about having Matt there. Here's another little bit of advice. When Matt comes out, let's just say you do reach out to him. He comes out on site with you. He looks at it. You guys, let's just say you write a contract. You go into escrow. Remember who helped you with that negotiation. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm just going to say, I know Matt's not throwing this out, but he takes care of you. You take care of him. You know what I mean? I'm just saying.
Only
Thanks,
fair.
Rich.
Only
All right. I
fair.
need a bottle of whiskey now, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So the APN guy is the assessor's parcel number. That's how we assign essentially an address to a piece of land that's otherwise unaddressable. Okay. So you can kind of get into the, kind of Google that and it'll kind of give you a little more deeper detail as far as what all that stuff is. But these are some of the things, and Google's great, guys. Get on there, and if something pops up, like leach field, you don't know what a leach field is, Google it. Pretty easy, right? Self-explanatory, get you nice photos, you'll understand what's kind of going on. Okay. So as you're fielding these calls and they have some of these questions, guys, don't feel like you have to have all the answers right then and there. All right. Great question. Let me ask the seller. Right.
Yeah.
So that's an easy way for you to buy some time to go to Google and say, oh, what's the leach field? Okay. Right. So you guys don't be nervous about it. Right. They're people too, but you'll get a sense if you get somebody who, what I would consider a professional, who really knows what they're doing and talking about, get me on the phone, because you could lose them, because they'll sniff you out pretty quickly if you don't know what you're talking about.
Hey, yeah, and that's a fact, because I started off like that too. And I was like, oh shoot, these guys know more than I have no clue. So that's when I started asking Matt to help me out. So here's a question for you real quick. I'm sure that this kind of goes over a lot of us too. So we've got raw land. Raw land is actually nothing done. It's just raw land. And let's just say it's $200,000 for that raw land. Now we have that land graded, and we have that land where it's got utilities on site. What's the price difference? Like ballpark figure, like what are we looking at with those things done to it? When we see that, when we see land that says raw, it's 200,000. Now we fast forward, let's just say someone purchased it, they fixed it, they did something, and then they graded it, and then they put utilities in. Now, what's the value of those two things to that land? So we can kind of get a better understanding of how important it is when you see raw land versus graded land.
Right. So a difficult question to answer, because obviously it depends on where we're at in the world, okay, that we're talking about this piece of land. But there are some real hard costs that are now sunk into that land in Rich's example there, right? We're talking about some utilities, we're talking about grading, right? So there's some real live hard cost expenses that were put into that land. So those at a minimum are going to be tacked onto whatever we believe the fair market price is for that raw land. But not just that, right? Because there's also a bunch of soft costs that went into those, being able to put those utilities in that road and grading that lot, right? Because we had to go in and we had to do some design work. We had to do some engineering work. we had to go to the city and we had to get approvals to grade, right? We can't just go and start grading land around the world here. We can't just go do that unless we own it. And we're just kind of going around and we're making a little dirt bike track or something like for our kiddo, right? But we're looking at building something. No, this is permits, right? So there's soft costs and there's hard costs, but they're all real costs. So we're going to tack those on, and then we're going to throw a premium on that too for our efforts and our time, right? So it's very hard to say. If we were looking at a piece of land and I had a client, for instance, let's say Richie owns, had 2 acres in Valley Center, and you know what, we've got a big development that just came out near us, and we're going to kind of get this thing ready to go for a kind of a custom home type deal. We would work on that, kind of see what it costs, and we would put a premium on that guy. But honestly, guys, that asking price is a starting point only, because man, land will sit there for, land is not liquid. That's why banks do not like to lend on land, right? You can't just get a mortgage for a piece of land. No, you have to get a construction loan, because they want you to put value into that land to a point where that it's you can liquidate it. So if you stop paying the bank, they can sell that piece of land, right?
Yeah,
Because of how it has improvements on it. So
right.
it's a tough question, Rich.
I know
but
it is. I just want everyone
Yeah.
to know, though, there's more value to a graded lot because of what goes into it, as opposed to just, an undeveloped lot. So we've got 2 questions real quick. We've got one from Jacqueline. She just says she has a question, so she wants to ask it. And then Paula
Go for it.
asked about unimproved land. Is that the same as raw land? Just a yes or a no?
Unimproved land, yes.
Yes.
Same thing as raw. Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, my question, sorry if you already answered it, I missed part of it, so I can watch the replay if you already answered, but like I've had people ask me before, like, oh, I have a friend with a big plot of land and they want to like section off a piece and sell it to me. Like, how difficult is that?
Well, it depends, because typically what to do something like that, to subdivide a piece of land, right? Or if we're going to do, if we have, let's say, 2 parcels that are next to each other, and we want to do what we call a lot line adjustment, right? We're either going to absorb one of those pieces of land into one now, or we're going to say, make one bigger and one smaller, whatever it is. That's a lot line adjustment. But subdividing, which I think what you're doing, they're going to carve off a piece of like a small piece of a larger piece and carve it off and make it its own. That's a subdivision, and it's a public process. So it's public hearing, which means you have to notify all of your neighbors within 500 feet of you, that you've got to give them proper notice, and then we have to have a hearing. Depending on where you're at, you may have no one show up, or you may have the whole stinking town show up, right? Depends on where you're at. And then the city or the county council are going to hear your case, hear any objections or voices in favor of, and then make a judgment on whether or not you can do that, right? And then at that point, it's also about, you have to have, there's soft costs in that, because you have to have engineers come out and put together a plat map that shows the subdivision, the new legal descriptions that you're proposing, so on and so forth. So it takes time. It's a public hearing process that can or may go sideways on you. So, but it's absolutely possible. It's done all the time.
Well, cool. Hey, don't mean to run you guys short, but Jen's got to take over. She's got another meeting coming up. Hey, Matt, thank you so much, man, for everything you've done. There's so many land questions that are going to continue to hit. If you guys have any questions, please go on the Slack channel. I know we always wind up on like the team, all questions, whatever. Go to the land Slack channel. That is made for just this guy right here, and he will help you out. Another real quick thing is, Jacqueline, it's zoning. If it's zoned, they need to look and see if it's zoned for parcel, if they can multiple, break it out. But anyways, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.